Please subscribe and hit the like button.
Well, this is a good time to be strong. I haven't spent a lot of time on the news here, mainly because we read a review from Yahowah saying that we ought not be focused on it during this period of time because it's going to be distracting and it's so disorienting and so negative. But I do think we need to at least do a upper level review from time to time. Kirk, you received a notification this morning on your telephone, did you not? Screaming at you.
I did, yes, sir. Oh, yeah. It was loud.
And it wasn't something that you even had a choice to answer, was it?
No. It's it was shock. It was a shock. It came right through the cell phone, and I had no idea it was coming or have ever heard anything like that.
Yeah,
just a blast from the.
So you had a cell phone blast, and what was the message?
The message was the COVID is running rampant. Stay home. Don't go out of your house. Wear a mask, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the party line, and just so Peyton and I decided we'd go out for a long walk. So we did.
That's great.
So there.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. There you go.
Comrade Newsom.
Yeah, Comrade Newsom. 34,000 Californians today were tested positive for COVID. 13,000, and that was in just California. 13,000 in Texas today. 11,000 in Florida. 11,000 in Illinois. 10,000 in New York. 11,000, almost 12,000 in Ohio. That is so far today. The interesting thing, of course, speak of the great state of Texas, our closest friend on the island, her three closest friends, were all in line to get a COVID test in Texas about a month ago. And they waited in line, they paid their money, they signed up, and they waited in line another about 2 hours, and they just finally gave up and said, this is ridiculous. I don't want to stand near all these sick people for another 2 hours. And they just left.
No, that's the trouble. Yeah.
But guess what?
That's the trouble.
All three of them got emails from the testing facility and the health department, said that they had tested positive. None of the three took the test.
Really?
None of the three took the test. They were all told they tested positive.
Wow.
Yep. There is a serious issue. One of our closest friends on this island wanted to travel, and traveling today, you have to take a COVID test. He is feeling absolutely fine. He has zero symptoms. He went in, they told him he had a positive test. And so he couldn't travel and needs to self-quarantine, and he doesn't have a symptom. My closest friend on the island is assistant, whose office he has to walk through every day, 20 times a day, right next to his. You have to walk through her office to get to his office. She came down. First thing, she had the inability to taste, which is one of the telltale signs. And so she came down. She had symptoms, and she tested positive. He had been within inches of her, not wearing a mask. She's not wearing a mask, in their office, working on everything imaginable in business. She's touching everything that he touches. 8 days after she tested positive, he and his entire staff had to get tested. They were all negative. So there's something fishy going on here. Speaking of COVID, it's the two things I want to share is that states like California are going through the most rigid, draconian lockdowns of the process, and it's like, okay, California has been in lockdown mode since April, and their response to the failure of lockdown mode is to
locks it down some more.
Lock down more. In this particular case, it is now illegal for you to have a friend over to your home. You cannot go to an extended family member's home to celebrate a holiday. You can't have them at your home. It's only your own family members. If you have a non-essential business, you're essentially shut down. If you have an essential business, only a third of your workers can show up. And that's just amazing.
Yeah.
Who made these people dictator? The Pfizer vaccine was rolled out in mass a couple of days ago, starting in Britain, and apoplectic shock is becoming a real problem. Now, that would normally be part of any vaccine that 1 in 100,000 would have that kind of a very serious, potentially deadly reaction to the virus. In this case, it is much more frequent, but then no one has ever done a mass rollout of a messenger RNA vaccine. So I guess it is certainly possible, and in Great Britain, the first to do a national rollout of the vaccine. There's some alarming negatives. I want to talk a little bit about the election. Kind of things that were surprising in this election. Do you know that Trump actually received 13% more African American votes than any other Republican candidate ever? He received 10% more African American votes than he did the last time in his previous election. And that time he received 3% more than any Republican had previously. So the very people that you would think would be the most anti-Trump were increasingly supporting Trump. It was also interesting to read that men overwhelmingly want less government. Women overwhelmingly want more government. Hispanics were fairly evenly divided in this particular election, which is uncommon. They're normally very, very Democratic. Men or Caucasians were overwhelmingly for a smaller government, voting for the conservative. The biggest gap of all, and it's a gap that spells absolute disaster for the country. And while we are in the covenant, we're called to be anti-political, and I do not vote, and I recommend that if you are part of the covenant or thinking about being part of the covenant, don't vote. God is expressly asked us to walk away from our country. But it doesn't alter our responsibility for exposing things that we think are troubling, so that people don't rely on their country. There is a statistic that is irreversible and devastating. And as again, while we are not to be political, since God is anti-government, anti-politics, the conservative approach, forget about party for a moment, but a conservative who wants less government is much more consistent with Yahweh's approach than a liberal who wants more government. Okay, so just from a practical point of view, the people who are voting for more government control, more government programs, are at the extreme of what Yahweh dislikes. And somebody that says, I want less government and less government intrusion are at least associated with the direction that God would want us to go. Young people under the age of 29. So voters between 18 and 29. Over 90% vote for the most liberal candidate. 90% is the single most skewed demographic in American politics. And it's obvious that they have been overwhelmingly indoctrinated by social media, which is exceedingly liberal, by the media, which is exceedingly liberal, and they have not had enough exposure outside of the indoctrination of academia to understand the economic realities between big and small government. But 90 to 10, I thought that was interesting. There is a suit right now, the state of Texas, and I think there's a bunch of states that have sided with Texas, and about 150 some odd congressmen and senators that have sided with this suit. And Texas has brought suit against the states that at the last minute changed their voting procedures to facilitate massive additional amounts of write-in ballots, which are much harder to validate and thus much more susceptible to voter fraud. And the state of Texas is suing because of the fact that they realized that the legislatures in those states who would not have allowed it are Republican, but the legislatures were not asked to vote on it. It was a procedural choice, and the government workers are overwhelmingly liberal. And so government employees put this together without the approval of the legislature. And so that's why Texas is suing. Now, I do not know if they will prevail. If they do not prevail, it'll be because Texas doesn't have a standing in what happens in these swing states. But their argument is valid. What's most interesting, of course, is that you constantly are hearing now that Trump is saying that there was voter fraud without any evidence of voter fraud. Now, I told that to Leah 2 nights ago. And I said, I'm not reading any articles that indicate that there was a massive amount of voter fraud. She says, well, let me check into that for you. She listened to 8 hours of what is about 20 hours of congressional testimony, where people under oath swore to what they had seen. It's as reliable of evidence as you could have. And of this 20 hours of testimony, it was one proof after another of massive voter fraud and the witnessing of massive voter fraud. So when the media is saying there is no proof of it, it's like the overall liberal position now on evidence. When evidence doesn't suit their facts, they just deny the evidence exists. There was overwhelming amounts of voter fraud. And that's disappointing because what now? If we ignore it, then the con artists have prevailed. If we deal with it, then we put the country into what will be anarchy. Yeah. It's an exceedingly difficult position that we find ourselves in, and there are no good answers here for America. It's an exceedingly sad day. Speaking of sad, Turkey has decided they were going to purchase and deploy a Russian air defense system, and yet they're a NATO nation. And then when the U.S. said, we're going to sanction you because we told you not to do this, because they're a joke being part of NATO anyway. They're off killing the Kurds, who are the only thing that's decent in that whole region. And Erdogan saying you're disrespecting Turkey to impose any sanctions against them, so that Turkey can play with the Russians and play with the Americans, and nobody can tell Turkey what to do. Then, if you can't reason with Turkey, why are they in a NATO alliance?
Yeah, good question.
And why is Erdogan so belligerent? He was even gone so far that he's, on the warpath, said that France ought to replace their president because their president has tried to protect the French people from Islamic terrorism. And he says, somebody that would do that needs to be replaced. And he says, I hope that the French do away with him. He's a horrible leader. So the Muslims are authorized, according to Erdogan, to murder as many non-Muslims as they want to. We will continue to kill you, and you will like it. Yeah. Don't want to hear anybody complaining that we're killing you. Yeah, great. Israel looks like it's headed to another election. Benny Gantz, has decided he doesn't want to be a part of the Netanyahu coalition, and so it means another election. On the positive side, or another one for the Trumpster. I don't know if it's Trump or his son-in-law, Kirshner, but somebody has figured it out, and it appears that economics is the driver. But Morocco is now joining those other countries and normalizing relationships with Israel. And in addition to Morocco, the Saudi Arabians are working with the Israelis on opposing Iran and its development of nuclear weapons, as well as now allowing Israel to overfly its airspace. So we are in a most interesting time. I'd like to read
my enemy is.
Yeah, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And of course, the only reason that Iran is empowered is twofold. One is Jimmy Carter did the insane and decided that he would oppose the Shah and support the Ayatollah. And boy, that ruined a whole lot of people's lives. And then after we did that, we showed no willingness to constrain the nuclear program of Iran. We then freed all of their assets in an agreement which they had no intention of upholding, and yet we freed all their assets, which now enabled them to do whatever they wanted to do. And the combination is horrible, but ultimately Iran was empowered because of twofold. One is that the United States belligerently decided we would oppose China and Russia. Obama was great at it. Let's demean Russia, let's demean China, let's sanction both, and in so doing, and in sanctioning inappropriately Iran had no other choice but to use those two as their trading partners. They created an axis of evil, if you will, in the Middle East, and now everything is China, Russia, and Iran in opposition to everyone else, and it has made the region stunningly unstable. It's the reason for the Syrian civil war. So a lot of universal foolishness. I end up renaming the chapter. Is the first word that Yahweh says here in Hosea 2:2, which is where we're going to pick up the story of man. And he says, rib, quarrel and contend. Choose to oppose and be contentious, actually bringing charges against your mother, because she is not a woman of mine, and I am not an individual of hers. God is in Hosea saying that you are not my children, you're not my bride. I do not recognize you. There's no part of you that is appropriate. And it takes a lot, quite honestly, to get God to give up on you. I have spent some time getting into some detail on translations, like added translations about why and what happened with Abraham and Sarah when they went off to Egypt. Most people don't want to touch that. You know, they say, okay, well, he had a half lie of where he said that she was my sister. We'll get to that passage before long, because I've just finished translating it for volume 3 of Yada Yahweh. And I'm going to tell you it's repulsive. It's just flat out repulsive, what Abraham did. And he was enriched because he turned his wife over to be effectively a concubine in Pharaoh's house. He was enriched by that plan of him having his wife hauled off to be a sex slave in Pharaoh's house. Now, if that won't turn your stomach, I don't know what it takes. And yet, God didn't give up on him. He still formed the covenant with him. You know, Yahweh gave Towrah to Adam. He never says a negative thing about Towrah. And yet, when Towrah goes about naming her 2 sons, well, Abel means waste of breath. And Cain is my opportunity to rebel. They're horrible names. And, it's all the way through the story of we humans, even those that God forms relationships with and uses in the most powerful ways, we've really got a bad streak. Okay. And so the same thing is here. And it takes a lot for God to get to this point where he says, I'm just giving up on it. Because it's hard to imagine someone doing something worse than Abram did, and God didn't give up on him. It underscores the fact that being good is not what he's looking for. He's looking for us to be right. And Abram got his act together in the end and was right. But boy, between here and there, it was not a pretty picture. So this says, quarrel and contend. Choose to oppose. Be contentious against your mother, because she is no woman of mine, and I am not an individual of hers. Let her choose to turn away from her continual whoring through her illicit relationships with false deities within her presence, as well as her marks of unfaithfulness between her breasts. Okay, God is calling Israel a whore. Mm-hmm. Says, got nothing but illicit relationships with false deities. I don't recognize you. I don't know you. I don't like you. I don't respect you. I most certainly don't love you. And when he said this, it's really quite amazing that God would go better part of 2,700 years with the relationship between he and his people severed. He wouldn't intervene when the Babylonians abused them, when the Assyrians abused them. Didn't intervene when the Greeks abused them or the Romans abused them 3 times. It didn't intervene when the Byzantines abused them or when the Muslims abused them multiple times. Didn't intervene when the Nazis abused them. He doesn't know them. And he went so far as to say, because your religion and your lifestyle is so disgusting, I'm just going to blind you. Because the worst thing that could possibly happen is for you to get some of this stuff right, and your half-truths when you're pretending to
more powerful
serve me is really going to screw things up. It's horrible for Jews to celebrate Passover with their Seder and screw everything up by having everything on the plate but lamb. That's disgusting. But what if they actually understood Passover, were celebrating it not because of Egypt, but because it was the doorway to life, and that they spoke of it that way, and they understood the sacrifice of the lamb? If they understood the purpose of the unyeasted bread and the bitter herbs. And what if they actually referred to God not as Hashem or Adonai, but as Yahweh? How much more difficult would it be
to overcome it?
To overcome that and say, Yahweh, yes, that's God's name, all right, but don't follow anything these Jews do. That's all they do is they get that right, nothing more. Well, it'd be a disaster. Be unconscionable how much more difficult it would be. So God, yes, here in Hosea, this is the divorce. You're not my children. You're not my bride. You're not my people. I don't know you anymore. I want nothing to do with you. You are revolting. I see Orthodox Jews, which is the fastest growing movement within Jewish people today. And Haredi movement in particular. But when I see them with their little beaver hats and their black mourning clothes, the women with the shaved heads, so they have to have wigs. They got the little curly cues coming down the side. And they're playing religion all day. They don't work. all they do is strive to keep their children and their wives from turning against their control. And they spend all day being religious. And I look at them and I want to puke. They dress the Torah up like it's a whore in this little dress. And of course they study the Talmud. They're disgusting. And that's my view of them. They turn my stomach when I see them. That's Yahweh's view too. Those are not my people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know them. I don't like them. They're whores. Now, some people say that's anti-Semitic. No, I'm speaking out against the religion. Religion of Judaism is repulsive. God hates it. This is a condemnation of Judaism, folks. That's what God said through the prophet Hosea. So if you don't want to condemn Judaism, then you're in opposition to God. And if you do condemn it, you're not being anti-Semitic. I'm not condemning the race, I'm condemning the religion. And they're very separate things. Mm-hmm. In this passage, Yahweh is affirming that he views illicit religious relationships with false deities as the equivalent of being a whore and committing adultery. That is the way we should be interpreting the statement on the second tablet that speaks of not committing adultery. God is speaking about religious infidelity. Of all of the choices we humans make, this is the one that God despises the most. Goddamn religion. Yahweh hates religion. Well, I'm speaking of that. I wrote it in the chat room. I haven't mentioned it audibly, but we are publishing at Amazon. I think it'll be ready tomorrow, if not maybe a couple of days. But the second book of the Yada Yahweh series. The first book we published about 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, called In the Beginning. The second volume now is called The Story of Man. It's got a lot of insights in it. This volume, like the first one, the translations are 100% new. I've retranslated every passage. The insights are probably 80% new. So there's a lot of new material here. So the first volume is In the Beginning. The second volume is The Story of Man. The third volume, I'm on the last chapter right now of my edits of the third volume. And the third volume will be In the Covenant. And then I'll likely turn my attention to what right now is 2 volumes on or will be 2 volumes. I think it might even be 3 volumes on the Mikra. And that's going to be a long process. I'll probably have 3 or 4 months in it because I have not done those translations in probably 15 years. And we have come a long way since they were written. So that's going to be a slow process. But hopefully by redoing everything, we'll come up with a whole lot of fresh insights. And I can tell you the story of man has a lot of them. Explaining the spiritual message that's underlined his instructions, Yahweh tells us that our infidelity affects our children, separating them from God. This is the same message that is reinforced at the conclusion of the second statement that you etched in stone. It says, the fathers corrupt their children, the 3rd and 4th generation. So this is Hosea 2:4. It says, and therefore, I will have no concern or compassion for her children, because they are children of whores, prostituting themselves through illicit relationships with false gods. This is the God of Abraham, Yishak, and Jacob. This is the God of Israel. This is the God of the Torah, of the prophets and Psalms. This is Yahweh. And he is saying of Yisrael, of Israel, that will have no concern or compassion for her children, because they're the children of whores, prostituting through illicit relationships with false gods. I think even today, God would say this of every Orthodox religious Jew. Is there the possibility that there are some Reformed Jews that are somewhat religious, that are beginning to question their religion and will leave it? I hope so. But of religious Jews, he's saying exactly the same thing. That's quite a statement. And ultimately, the reconciliation of Yahweh and ethnic Jews, not religious Jews, is something that God has promised and will mandate. It will happen. It's already happening. But over the next 13 years, we're going to see a lot of it. Hopefully, it goes beyond thousands and tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. I would love it to be millions. I don't think it'll be that many. It is true today that about 70+% of Jews are secular. And there's always hope for a secular Jew. But God's view of religious Jews is they are not my children. And that's never going to change. The only hope that any of us have is to leave religion. Because while we are religious, we look disgusting to God. Now, upsetting God to this degree is a very poor life choice. And yet it became so commonplace in Israel, and it is still so commonplace, that with only a handful of right-minded universals through whom he could counsel his people, a handful of them, Yahweh was left with no other option but to condemn the nation for their propensity to chase after false gods. This time out for bad behavior would endure through the centuries to this day. I had a friend, Lily and I did over for dinner tonight, and she was talking, her brother, whom I've also got to know, very, very successful businessman, says, you know, that Craig, he's a different cat. Even when it's in his interest to go along, make a compromise, he won't ever do it. I mean, he will take the high ground and stand for what he thinks is right, even when it's against his own interests. Why does he do that? And this woman who's very close to Lynn, I like her too. She's a nice, very bright person with a lot of character. She said, well, you need to be appreciative that somebody will. Mm-hmm. What would the world be like if there was no one willing to take a stand for right? And they take a hit. And you just absolutely take a hit. You are not going to be popular. You're going to have lots of enemies. And in my case, I have 10,000 death threats. You will guarantee that you will be unpopular and that you'll have horrible things said about you in the media if you're willing to take this stand. But it's the right thing to do. It's what Yahweh does. One of the reasons Yahweh is not popular is he takes a stand against these things. Right is right, wrong is wrong. Dod took a stand against them. Look at the hit that he got. Moshe did. Whacked for it. But we need to do it. That's what God is encouraging us to do. Yahweh left with no other option to condemn their nation, his nation. This time out for bad behavior would endure through the centuries to this very day. It should have been obvious as the nose on their faces. But should anyone be as misguided as Yisrael appears to have been before the northern kingdom's demise in 2700 BCE, God is condemning religion, not sexuality, when he says they're a bunch of whores. This has nothing to do with sexuality. He's condemning religion. This seductive harlot's intention was to lure the nation away from Yahweh, and she, the whore of Babylon, remains successful. Here is Hosea 2:5. For surely their mother was unfaithful and wantonly committed religious adultery. Zana was idolatrous harlot, a solicitous whore. She who conceived them, she who gave birth to them, should have been embarrassed and ashamed for this mistake in judgment. Both should have been humiliated and disgraced. But yet, you go and you talk to a rabbi, and they're the most arrogant people on the planet. You go talk to an Orthodox religious Jew, and they just ooze arrogance. They should be ashamed. They should be humiliated. They should be embarrassed. But they're not. All one has to do is look at the statuary and religious relics which have decorated every civilization. Gods and goddesses were modeled after what, Kirk? JB?
Mankind.
Man. Yeah. If you look at any of the statuary in Greece, where they have all the gods, Mount Olympus, the Parthenon, all the gods look like men and women, don't they?
Absolutely.
Same thing is true in Rome. All the gods were chiseled in the image of man. At least the Babylonians made their gods winged lions or
lions or horses or something,
or donkeys or bulls or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in Egypt, they claimed, of course, the king, the pharaoh, was a god. But and in Egypt, about half the images of the various gods are drawn in as caricatures of man. Mm-hmm. We are so arrogant that we have made ourselves gods, the gods of religion. Well, look at the God of Christianity. He's nailed to a stick. Yeah. God is a man in Christianity. We turned God into a man. We wanted a God that was like us. By God, we created one, didn't we? We should be embarrassed. I mean, what could be, now this is not Judaism, but what could be more embarrassing than parading around and tattooing and building great shrines to a torture stick and then carving an edifice of your God on that stick so that he is tortured forever? Gee, what a nice thing to do. Yeah, what I think I want you to do is to celebrate me as your God. And what I want you to do is I want you to torture me, and then I want you to prolong that memory. So if you're going to torture me on a stick, then make your religion tortured me on a stick. Boy, what would be better than being tortured, other than being tortured and being commemorated for all time being tortured?
Don't you think in 2:2, as a secondary meaning where he says what she's hanging between her breast, don't you think that's could be a reference to the crosses everybody wears in Christianity? I know he's talking to Yehudim.
Yeah, he's talking
is there anything comparable?
To Jews.
Yeah.
It
just occurred to me.
I don't know.
But anyway.
Well, of course, Jews created Christianity. I mean, Paul created Christianity. He was a Jew.
Yeah.
It was a Jew that created Islam. Muhammad was Jewish. Heck, Hitler was a Jew. Nazi.
Yeah. Lenin.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be, but I think that God has a lot of things to say about Paul. Call him the plague of death, the father of lies, the son of evil. He has a lot of things to say about Pauline Christianity, all of which are bad. But in Hosea, he's talking to Israel.
And yeah.
Yeah, you should be embarrassed.
Well, we certainly adopt everything. Anything bad is done, we adopt it too. So when the Americans do.
Yep, gods and goddesses are modeled after men, and listen, in Judaism, they never mention Yahweh's name. They pay very little attention to his Torah. They prefer the Talmud, which was, those are the words of men. In Judaism, the adoration is for rabbis. It's the same thing. You know, look at the gods and goddesses modeled after men with the special devotion to, throughout history, phallic symbols, vaginas.
Yeah.
You know, the Ankh and the Jesus fish. The Ankh has a vagina. The Jesus fish, it was a vagina. That's what it was drawn to represent. The Star of David is actually the same thing. You know, look up when those things came into being. And, you know, when I'm talking about condemning Orthodox Judaism, they want you to believe that, you know, it's ancient. It goes back to the time of Moses. But no, that's not true. There was no Judaism at the time of Moses. You know, when the religion of Orthodox Judaism, all of the practices of Orthodox Judaism, you know where they were first invented and first observed?
11th century?
18th century.
Codified it. 18th century, okay.
18th century in Europe. Yep, nope. The father of Orthodox Judaism is actually called
Rambam.
The Lord of I don't know if it's the Lord of the Words or but he's actually Baal. The Lord of something. We'll come up with it later, but yeah, he's actually called the Lord. And
sounds
so
like
it's an 18th century European phenomenon that has been brought into Israel and brought into like the New York area, and where there's Orthodox Jews, they're all practicing a religion that is the most recent of major religions. It has no history going back past the 18th century. It's also when the Star of David was conceived, and if you look it up, you'll see that it was designed to be a phallic symbol. And phallic symbol and vagina, so it's 6 phallics surrounding a vagina. This is man's history. The object of devotion and worship in every religion is the things that are animalistic. Humans as God. Of all people, Yehudim Jews should have known better. But such was not the case. Israel would become the womb of religion, and God is not amused. Whores give birth to bastards. Lost in their devotion to Judaism, Christianity, Islam, social or secular humanism, they remain estranged from the only true God. It is a miscarriage on a national scale, the abortion of a people. Now, I have found myself, and maybe I'm in a rut right now, but boy, I made a commitment very early on to go where the words lead. And I don't know how you read this. What God is calling his people whores is that I don't even know you anymore. You should be ashamed, but you're not. What's wrong with you? I don't know how you read that and not become judgmental against Judaism and expose it and condemn it and despise it. I don't know when you read what Abraham allowed to happen to his wife and how he profited from it. I don't know how you read that and not be upset by it.
Yeah.
But man, we haven't given God much to work with. It's extraordinarily sad. And there's been a long time when the chosen people haven't been chosen. That God's just said, all right, so much for you. I'm not sure that God had a single person through whom he could speak through credibly for a better part of 2,000 plus years. And by the time we get to Malachi, like 450 BCE, 500 BCE, to, maybe 20, 30 years ago, who was God speaking to?
Mm-hmm.
Who was speaking for Yahweh?
Well, the only thing that happened then is you got the Dead Sea Scrolls are starting to show up. So
yes.
Thank goodness that was there.
Yeah.
Only place to find
but
it.
not a lot of people translating them and saying, look how different this is than what we have been told. Yahweh can resolve many things, but religion is not one of them. We must expunge it from our lives before God will have anything to do with us. There has never been, nor will there ever be, a rabbi, a pope, a cardinal, a bishop, a priest, a pastor, an imam, or a nun in heaven. The very people who claim to point the way to heaven will never see it. Well, this is the most rational alternative. It is followed by a scathing indictment. It says, listen to the word of Yahweh, children of Israel. Shama, Dabar, Yahweh, Beni Israel. That's what we ought to be doing. But, religious Jews don't listen to the word of Yahweh. They spend all day bobbing their heads up and down, citing memorized prayers, which God never hears. Listen to the word of Yahweh, children of Israel. When I was a Christian long ago, and I would be asked in front of a lot of people to get up front and lead the congregation in prayer, I always realized the same thing that every pastor that's ever done it realizes. He's not speaking to God. I wasn't speaking to God. I was speaking to be heard by the congregation.
Yeah, to the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. Surely, with regard to Yahweh, there is a contentious conflict which needs to be resolved through rational discourse, especially concerning living in the land. So God's advice is, listen to Yahweh, children of Israel, and then he says, surely, with regard to Yahweh, there is a contentious conflict which needs to be resolved through rational discourse, especially concerning living in the land. Who in Israel is using Yahweh's name? Nobody.
Not allowed, are you?
No. Who in Israel is explaining it? We are Yahudim. We are the beloved of Yah. David was the Messiah, the Son of God, the King of Kings. Yahweh is returning. He's going to reestablish the covenant. We need to disassociate from religion. We need to disassociate from politics. We need to stop relying on ourselves and start relying on God. Who's saying that in the land?
Yeah.
No one.
Nobody home.
This is because there is absolutely no honesty, nor integrity, no trustworthiness, no reliability. None. Can you imagine being the recipient of this? God is saying, you are absolutely, totally, and completely worthless. No integrity, no honesty, no trustworthiness, no reliability. If a person isn't honest, has no integrity, isn't trustworthy nor reliable, what good are they? There is no sense of devotion, desire, or duty. So beyond the fact that all the cerebral things are wrong, even the heart is wrong. The entire being is infected. when it comes to God, there is a complete lack of understanding throughout the land. That's God saying that circa 700 BCE, that there wasn't a single person that understood who he was or what he was offering. There was no devotion, there was no desire, there was no honesty, no integrity, and that the land was in contentious conflict. And I'm going to tell you, it's worse now than it was then. Look at Israel. I mean, Netanyahu's only prime minister because, well, he kowtows to the
compromise.
The religious right, who are completely wrong. That's the problem. They're a parasite. Orthodox Judaism is a malignancy. That's not my opinion.
It's Yahweh.
That's God's conclusion. That's Yahweh's conclusion. And look at Israel. It's a blend of socialist secular humanism, to the point it's communism, extreme religious orthodoxy, and Islam. What a mess. It's worse now than it was at the time of this indictment. The chosen people chose not to listen. Rather than serving as Yahweh's prophets and people, they became contentious and quarrelsome. The first family was in shatters, torn up and broken. The grievances arose because Jews chose religion over the relationship God had offered. You know, most all of us have a fractured family. Most families are fractured on many levels. There's the fracture between parents and children. And most of us have had parents that were deeply flawed. And our relationship with our parents, for most people, is not good. Most of us have highly contentious relationships with our spouses. Most of us. Most of us end up having problems, contentious problems, with one or more of our children. Most of us have contentious problems with one or more of our siblings. On the four immediate levels of family, most families are broken in one or more of those levels, and many on all four. And the reason that's important is for us to know it is just in our nature. And the single most important family relationship that is fractured is between the children of Israel and Yahweh, between mankind and our Heavenly Father. Yahweh said when it came to him, Israel had become ignorant and irrational, showing a complete lack of understanding. Lacking integrity, they could no longer be trusted. Their religious testimony was not the least bit credible. They had become renegades, scoundrels, with no sense of duty, no desire to change. If you're a Jew, by listening to a rabbi, you're putting your soul in peril. I just translated the passage where Yahweh says that he finds the Jewish religious celebrations to be an abomination, that they're absolutely appalling. And you think about it for a moment. You know, the celebration of Passover, you got everything there but the lamb. There's a lamb bone, and that's it. And you got to have, push the lamb to the side so you can make room for all of the rabbinical accoutrements. They don't celebrate Shabbat, but prefer instead Purim. They don't celebrate Towrah, but instead prefer Rosh Hashanah. They don't even have a clue when it comes to Yom Kippurim. Rather than celebrating the reconciliation of the relationship, which is uplifting and nurturing and wholesome and good. No, they have is a day where they afflict and humble their souls, which is the opposite of what Yahweh intended. So I think your religious celebrations are disgusting. Look at, even said about their Shabbat. It says, your Shabbat, I find appalling. No, the Shabbat is a day to celebrate the relationship, celebrate the promise of 7. It's not a day to be a mushroom. It's not a day to do what Orthodox Judaism does, which makes it the most tortured day of the week, where there's a list of hundreds of rules that you have to follow. Can't push the elevator button. Can't answer the phone. Can't turn on the light. Can't turn off the light. Can't cook a meal on the stove. Can't feed your family. Can't do this.
I just love how they come up with all the little workarounds so they can still do all that. Oh, well, I get the fire going the night before, so now I just leave that go all night, and now I can cook on it because I didn't start the fire.
Ah, there you go.
Oh, the loophole.
My neighbor came over and turned my lights on for me.
Yeah. It's just so hypocritical and disgusting. They've turned the Shabbat into the most torturous day of the week. Well, they do everything but celebrate their relationship with Yahweh. They had become renegades and scoundrels. There are oaths uttered which are spiritually harmful. Allah, swearing things which are not true about God, has become commonplace, counterproductive, and contrary to the truth. It's lamentable. With cringeworthy lies and debilitating deceptions, disappointing denials and false accusations, there is killing. And there are many causes of death, both premeditated and unintended, taking of life, along with thievery. There is dishonesty in the relationship, whereby they breach the agreement in destructive, divisive, and damning ways. Bloodshed becomes a violent plague of bloodletting. Wow. Come on, God, tell us what you really think. God, have you ever heard of political correctness? You know, God, if you were on Facebook, they'd censor you.
Yeah.
They'd freeze your account. God, if you were a politician, you'd be kicked out of office. God, you can't say these things in today's world. Oh, yeah. There are oaths which are uttered, speaking of the religion of Judaism, which are spiritually harmful, along with cringeworthy lies and debilitating deceptions. There is killing, along with thievery. Boy, I tell you, the whole rabbinical, I'm going to charge you for this, that, and the other. No matter what it is, I'll come up with a fee. Robbing the people. Then there is disloyalty in the relationship, breach the agreement in destructive, divisive, and damning ways. How many religious Jews say that their goal is to accept the conditions of the covenant so they can receive the benefits of being part of Yahweh's family? For those who may not have read Prophet of Doom, you are likely unaware that rabbis in Yahowah are largely responsible for the curse that has become Islam. Had they not cited the Babylonian Talmud to Muhammad, charged him for those recitals, and then mocked him when he convoluted them to serve his perverted interests, the Quran would have been the size of a pamphlet, would have lost all credibility. And Allah's little helper would have had no reason to annihilate Jews. But they did, and Yahweh was not pleased. They quite literally brought the curse of Allah on themselves and upon future generations of Jews. because rabbis sold Muhammad Talmud stories, which he integrated into his Quran. The same is true with Christianity, whereby a self-proclaimed rabbi turned on his own people and then created the most deadly and demeaning religion Jews would ever encounter. Born as Shaul and known as Paul, the failed rabbi created the world's most popular religion, and with it, the worst treatment of Jews in human history. Jews have been their own worst enemy. So much of what they have written and said about God has been untrue. Their lamentable claims have become commonplace, and yet they are counterproductive. Through Judaism, Jews have been universally dishonest about and disloyal to Yahweh. Rabbinic lives have been cringeworthy, their deceptions debilitating, and their feigned compliance damning, all while they have robbed their own under deliberately false pretenses. It is so obvious, and yet they're in complete denial. It was so obvious that Yahusha was the Passover lamb, and they of all people should have known it and recognized it. And when somebody said, oh, no, he is the Messiah, you just said, who in the world are you, boy, to talk about him being the Messiah? Him being the Messiah would require that he be anointed. Who anointed him? If he is the Messiah, why does he claim that he is the Messiah? Because he's not saying it. And oh, by the way, the Messiah is Dode. Go read the text. Go read the book that he's citing from. Dode is the Messiah. Yahweh anointed him.
3 times.
Yeah. You want to call this guy a son of God? Wait a minute. No. The son of God is Dode. Who are you kidding? I mean, the answer is no. The son of God is Dode. The Messiah is Dode. You want a king? That's Dode. This second coming nonsense? Have you not read the front of the book? It's Dode that's returning. What are you doing? No. When you read Yashayah, when you read Dode's 22nd and 88th Psalm, what this fellow that you're calling Jesus, whose name is Yahusha, he's the Passover lamb. That's a big job. Appreciate it. He's opening the doorway to life. But not a single Jew said it. Not one. You would have had no religion or Christianity if the Jews had simply known and said the truth. Instead, because they lied, because of the deceptions, a religion was emerged that was wholly anti-Semitic, that condemned Jews for killing God. Come on, folks. All you had to do and said, he came to die. He was the Passover lamb. But you didn't. Jews have been their own worst enemy. So much of what they have said and written about God has been untrue. To say that God hates Judaism would be an understatement. Rabbis have earned and deserved this rebuke. They're not alone. There was too much killing between Jews and their enemies from the fall of Israel in 721 BCE to the demise of Yehuda in 133 CE. But since that time, Jews have been murdered by Gentiles, especially Christians and Muslims, at a rate that greatly exceeds anything we have witnessed in human history. But the bloodshed, Jews brought it on themselves with Rome. Rome, yes, was disgusting. But to rebel against Rome, that took a lot more than what the Jews had to offer. And the Jews were so disunited. The first time that Rome came against the Jews was because you had two brothers both with Greek names, and a mother that had a Greek name, fighting among themselves for who would be king and who would be chief priest. And the one that was king that was the short stick, because there was a lot more money to be made and a lot more power and prestige to be chief priest. That was a much better gig. And so they fought between themselves, and they were so vicious about the infighting between their quest for power that they went to other countries of Gentiles and said, "Can you war against my brother?" And Rome finally said, "Wait a minute, we really don't give a hoot about Israel. We're only here because, well, we do care about Egypt. And this is en route to Egypt. And we can't have foreign armies in the middle of our pathway to Egypt." So that was the first Roman assault on Judea. And then Rome invited the second. But the Jews, divided, decided they would lash out at Rome. Were they right? Was there Jesus was the person's name that was imposing the temple tax, and robbing the treasury, and doing disgusting things. But the way Jews responded, and then when the first legions came in, the way that they obliterated them, you can get by with that stuff if you're trusting and relying upon Yahweh. Look at Hezekiah. But they didn't, and they invited a slaughter. And they were hauled off in slaves. And then the worst was Rabbi Akiva and his veneration of his false Messiah, Bar Kokhba. And he created the diaspora. Jews were, and during the time, Jews lost because there was too much infighting between the Jews. There were 3 warring camps, and they were killing each other. So much bloodshed. It had become a plague of bloodshed. The Holocaust would never have occurred if it wasn't for Rabbi Akiva. Had Jews, Christians, Muslims, and secular humanists not been so hostile to the covenant, so universally destructive, divisive, and damning in their approach to God, this bloodshed would not have become a plague. Now, I've grown to hate religion and despise what it does to people, their nation, and the world. And I've seen so many people harmed by it, devastated by it. But my animosity towards this plague and its perpetrators is but navel compared to the Almighty's animosity. And yet, in a world of cowards, I'm among the few who takes rabbis to task for what they have to say about Yahweh. It would take a Gentile, because Jews still have not been willing to stand up for God. They won't stand up against the rabbis, even to this day. There's a reason that God chose to reveal himself to this generation through a lowly Gentile. Because Jews, there was none of you willing to stand up, to take a stand, to take the time to learn the truth and the courage to say it. So now, how is it, Yahweh asks Ak? So how is it? Not a single individual has chosen to oppose this, who has been determined to contentiously contend against it. Rib. How is it, of all of these people, at least 15 million Jews today, how is it not a single individual has chosen to oppose this, who has been determined to contend against it? Look at the Jews in America. Who are them that are speaking out against the rabbis? A handful that have come to know Yah through our programs and translations of his testimony. But besides that, anyone? Is there anyone in Israel that's a voice against the rabbis?
Wouldn't dare.
I don't know any.
Oh. So God says, how is it there's not a single one of you? How did we get this job? Why did Yahweh choose to reveal himself through us? The testimony we're translating has been here for thousands of years. It's available to anybody. But take it seriously. Why would it take Gentiles to do this? Because not a single individual was chosen to oppose the religiosity and the politics of Jews. And there is none who chooses to dispute their claims by arguing against them, rebuking them. Not a single individual. Everybody just goes along. For your people are as contentious and insulting as the priests.
Wow.
God's not humored by this. He is just flabbergasted that you could go so long and that so many of you would be allergic to the truth, be opposed to him, that you would put up with this religious nonsense. I understand that for a long time that Yiddish is the language and that Hebrew was an unspoken language. And it's true that there haven't been good tools until fairly recently to be able to translate. But they exist now. There's no excuse now. Very little time left. Wake up. God wants to reconcile his relationship with Yisrael and Yahowah. He has promised to do so. Be among them. Be among them. God deserves it. And you'd benefit from it. Yahweh does not often answer rhetorical questions. But this time he did. The reason that there has not been a Jew willing to prove that the rabbis have continually lied about him is that the people have become as contentious as their religious leaders, as the priests. This, of course, inspires a question. Are Jews adverse to Yahweh because of rabbinical influence? Or have the rabbis become influential by feeding off of Jewish animosity towards God?
Wow. Wow.
Which one?
Good question. Maybe both.
If it wasn't for the overall animosity of the Jewish people towards God, the rabbis would not be empowered.
Couldn't exist.
Yeah.
No. They didn't come out of a vacuum, did they?
Yeah, but the rabbis have done their best to equate rabbinic Judaism with the ethnicity of being a Jew, and tried to control people. And Yahweh intended for the Shabbat judges to interpret his Torah, to keep his people such that they would help his people live harmoniously under its guidance. He intended for the Cohen priest to interpret his Mikra to help his people capitalize on the benefits. These were not paid positions, and God did not want those assigned to either role to reach around or past his Torah. He did not want anyone taking away from it or adding to it, as Jews, Christians, and Muslims have done, to their detriment, especially the chief priests and rabbis. So let's be back unequivocal. Yahweh's scathing indictment of his people is leveled at their propensity to be religious. He is condemning Orthodox Judaism. Now, if you are an Orthodox Jew, even a Christian, Muslim, or secular humanist, the best you can hope for is to be judged as a victim rather than perpetrator of these plagues, such that your soul fades into oblivion upon your demise, as chaff blown away by the wind. But should your devotion to your religion, your politics, your sense of patriotism, your military support, your affinity for conspiracies, or desire to advance the debilitating myths of socialist secular humanism, as now 90% of Americans under 29 years of age are doing, then the sentence of eternal incarceration in Sheol for having misled others is what you're going to endure. Choose wisely. God is not politically correct. He would be censured by Facebook today. He is not religious. He is not political. He is not tolerant. He is not multicultural. He is not amused. You know, if you look at Biden's at his transitional tape, he keeps on saying and proves it that his primary goal with his cabinet is to be multicultural, to be diverse. There is no point where God says, you know, I think what my goal is here is we want to be diverse. No. One way.
Diversity.
He has one name, one Torah, one covenant, one people, one land, one language.
He wants us all to be one.
One peace, and he wants us to be one with him. So, I'm sorry. That is, Van is as far estranged from God as, you know, is it's possible. Therefore, you have stumbled and fallen this day. And the one who claims to speak for God has also faltered and stumbled with you during the darkness. And so, therefore, I will make a parable of your destructive attempt to be like your mother. Hosea 4:5. You've stumbled and fallen. Especially the one who claims to speak for God. You're in the darkness. And therefore God says, I'm going to make a parable of your destructive attempt to be like your mother, a whore, a religious whore. You know, this is a scathing indictment.
God, I guess.
Against the very people would claim this testimony as being the inspired word of God. About the very people that this indictment is against are the ones who claim that their God inspired it. And that being the case, you had better wake up. Now, Yahweh uses Nabi prophet as he does Cohen priest in the sense that there are good and bad versions of each. In a way, it is similar to his use of El and Elohim. Only one true God and lots of imposters. When man is right with Yahweh, he's on his feet. He's looking up. He's reaching up. He's observant. He's responsive. He's active, engaged in this relationship. When man is wrong with God, he's on his knees. His head is bowed. His hands are clasped. His eyes and mind are shut. He is rendered comatose by religion. We can soar with Yahweh through space and time, or we can stumble and fall with our fellow man. Those are the choices before us. More than any other reason, mankind has fallen because those who claim to speak for God have wavered, and in the process they have failed the people, and none more so than Orthodox rabbis. When considering those Yahweh is admonishing, there are many who deserve this indictment. The plague of death on the man that conceived the Christian religion, Shaul, the failed rabbi, a renegade Jew. He became a prime example of all of this in 50 CE when he falsely claimed to have been chosen to speak for the Messiah. Rabbi Akiva, who connived his way into power and whose endorsement of a false Messiah in 133 CE led to the diaspora, and who became the father of Judaism, is also among the worst men who has ever lived. He is an exemplar of this condemnation. Well, most commonly known as such, another Jew, or not commonly known as such, another Jew, claiming initially to be the Messiah, Muhammad, became known as a prophet and messenger of a different sort of God, one modeled after Satan. His religion grew among Arabs, meaning darkness in Hebrew, which is intriguing, consider Yahweh's reference to Nabi and Leah, the night of darkness, a prophet of darkness. Most English translations render the concluding verb, dama, as I will destroy your mother. But that is not what happened. It's a non sequitur. As such, it would not have been appropriate, and it is not the primary meaning of the word. The problem here is that the people had become corrupted by their religious leaders. They were now being nurtured and raised in a toxic environment, making the allusion to one's mother a metaphor. Therefore, Yahweh is revealing that his people had Dhamma, become a parable, as a result of their destructive attempt to resemble the way they were raised. As a result, Dhamma, there would be no interaction, only total silence, because God had begun to see them as comparable to this intersection of their point of departure. What was their point of departure? Whoredom.
Religious whoredom.
Yep. Prostituting themselves to false gods. And of course, in Hosea, God makes it exceedingly clear as to who the false god that they prostituted themselves to. He calls it the Lord, the very word that they replaced Yahweh's name throughout their Tanakh is Adonai, the Lord. The Lord is Satan. Sad, huh?
Wow.
What follows is among the most salient statements in the whole of the Torah and prophets. And in this context, it is as germane to the current status of God's people as anything ever written about them. As a result, through the prophet Hoshea's salvation, Yahweh said something that is gut-wrenching. My people are ineffective and silenced in this way, serving as a metaphor for self-inflicted destruction, perishing because of what they have done to themselves, Daba, as a result of a lack of knowledge and corrupted information. Belly, ha, dayat, ignorance, a failure to understand, a deficiency in perceptiveness. Indeed, because you have avoided and rejected knowledge, which leads to understanding, I will also avoid and reject you from approaching me as or serving as priests. Since you have overlooked and forgotten the Torah guidance of your God, I will overlook and cease to care about your children also.
That's a beautiful translation. Wow. That is really well done. Wow.
So what you have here is Jews falling in love with the Mishnah and the Zohar and the Talmud. And paying no attention to the Torah. You had a Jew create a religion where he besmirched the Torah, condemned the Torah, assaulted the Torah, and then came up with his books as part of a New Testament. God said, no, you've overlooked my Torah. You've forgotten my Torah. I'm going to forget your children and your children's children and your children's children's children. If you forget and reject the Torah, teaching, guidance of Yahweh, he will forget you. And because when we forget it, our children forget it. That was the whole idea of the circumcision on the 8th day, that we circumcise our sons. And it says you circumcise every male, Zakar. It helps them remember. It helps us remember. We raise our children so that they grow up so that they know and understand and therefore make the right decision regarding the covenant. And we're doing what we should be doing. But if we ignore the Torah, we're ignoring the covenant because it's only presented in the Torah. If we're ignoring the Torah, we're ignoring the purpose of the 7 Moed Mikra because they're only presented in the Torah. If we ignore the Torah, we're ignoring the importance of Yahweh's name. We're ignoring God's request for us to walk away from religion and politics, to become part of his family. If we ignore the Torah, there's nothing that God can do for us. Nothing. He can't save you apart from the Torah. He can't protect you apart from the Torah.
Can't teach you nothing.
He can't even listen to you apart from the Torah. He can't do a thing for you apart from the Torah, other than say, I have nothing to do with you. I have nothing to do with you. I have nothing to do with your children. Yeah. So all he can say is, look at my Torah and look. For all of these centuries, God said there was no one. God, stop it already. Stop being a rebellion. Stop giving credence to the most disgusting people on the planet, the rabbis and the super religious. What have they gotten you besides misery? What have they gotten themselves besides misery? Why do you think they're wearing black mourning coats all the time? Why do you think they have to threaten their children and their spouses to keep them in this misery? Stop it already. Stop listening to them. Listen to Yahweh. That's his advice. Listen to Yahweh. You want to start listening to Yahweh? Start reading the Torah.
Right.
Those initial stories are marvelous. God's explanation of creation, giving that credibility, his relationship with Adam and then Chawah in the garden. Every word is a treasure. The explanation of Noah and how he listened to Yahweh and did what Yahweh said. And then at the end, Yahweh said, this is my covenant. This is how I protect those who are willing to listen to me. And then gives the sign, which is his bow of light. And over again, he would say, listen to me. And when he freed them from Egypt, crucibles of oppression, and spoke to them, what did they say? Oh my, you scare us to death. Please speak through Moses. Don't speak to us directly. Gosh, just stop it already. Listen to Yahweh. He's smart. He's funny. He's protective. He's loving. He's uplifting. He doesn't want to be worshipped. He doesn't want you to bow down. He doesn't want your money. He's not asking for faith. Not asking you to believe him. Most certainly doesn't want you to worship him. Just take the time to listen to him. Hear what he has to say. He's enlightening. He's uplifting. He's liberating. He's enriching. So much better. You lose nothing by giving up the religion. And you gain everything by being part of the relationship. Start celebrating his name. It's Yahowah. Embrace the covenant. Read the Torah. Celebrate the mikra as they were intended. Capitalize on what God is offering. It has been 2,700 years. Enough already. Well, we'll pick this up at this time next week. And I'm sorry to be so condemning of Judaism. I know that's hard for people to hear, but when we started this, we made a promise. We're going to go where the words lead. This is what God is saying. There is no other way to interpret this. As you said, that's an accurate translation. It is an accurate translation, and there are not a variety of ways to interpret these words. It's as straightforward as they come.
Pal, I check them all the time. You just can't go any other way.
Oh,
in my experience, whatever God is being condemning, he doesn't use, the words he uses are pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of complicated words with dual meanings. When he's condemning, he is cut and dry.
Yes. Now, there are times where those who are his prophets and are speaking for him, and you try to translate some things, and there's some things that are tough to translate. The language doesn't flow perfectly. We've lost a lot of meaning along the way. But you're right, JB. When God is going to expose his people for being religious, the concepts are not difficult to understand. They're exceedingly straightforward. They're easy to comprehend. It's painful. Because how would you like to be the creator of the universe and do all of these things for your people, offer them everything, and they spit on your face. And they spit on your face. And you're still there and say, I'm willing to overlook it. I mean, if he can overlook what Abraham did, he can overlook what you and your people have done. Just stop, and he will look the other way. Actually, he will envelop you in a garment of light if you stop and you reach out to him and you look her right in the eyes but see nothing but beauty. It's worth it. He's trustworthy. So we'll pick this back up, but as I say, it's impossible to see this any other way. And it's not like Hosea stands alone and there's one book condemning religion, and the rest are somehow different because you read the Torah and it's what it says. You can read the prophets and it's what it says, and no matter what you're reading, this is what God is saying. It is. Look at the book of Yahshua, the prophetic book of Yahshua. It starts out in the first 15 chapters. And the entire message is condemning religion and politics. The same is true in Yirmiyah. It's a consistent message. So it ought not be that difficult to understand. It's time, folks, that we encourage people to take the unpopular stand of speaking out against religion. Speaking out against politics, speaking out against
walk away from it,
speaking out against militarism, to walk away from it, to disassociate from it, and we're in really a mess between the world's response to coronavirus, the amount of fraud that appears to be in elections today, the degradation of reason amongst youth, the rise of jihadi Islam and anti-Semitism around the world, the huge increase in conspiracies and those who are adhering to them, the total destruction of the Western economies based upon the draconian move of the leftist governments. We're in a real tough time, and yet you can live even in the middle of all of this totally joyfully. I mean, I can tell you, I read this and I get angry for God and frustrated for God, but my life is extraordinarily happy and fulfilling, and joyful. It's I was sitting here this morning, and I felt it was just in fact it was yesterday and today a call to expand the story of Noah. In all of this time, I've never translated God's statement regarding his bow and what the colors of that bow signify, and how the colors of that bow tie in each of the Moed Mikra. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then in the midst of it, I felt compelled to do to follow Dode's example. Remember how in the 119th Psalm, Dode wrote 8 stanzas to each letter in the Hebrew alphabet in alphabetic order to explain how we should observe the Torah. So I took, and in it, he emphasizes, in the Aleph, it's filled with Aleph words. And Bayeth, the next letter, it's filled with Bayeth words. So what I did is I once I picked each of the colors and associated each of the colors with one of the Moed Mikra of the 7 colors of the rainbow. I said, all right, the first is Pesach. I looked up every single Hebrew word that started with a Pei and associated with Pesach, and then we get to matzah. I went through the entire Hebrew lexicon and listed all of so many marvelous words that start with it and that are essential to our understanding of this day. One of my favorite, I've always referred to matzah as a threshold. It's the threshold where we clean our feet. We walk into God, and we've been given immortality through the doorway of life on Pesach, and yet we still have to be cleansed as we're walking into God's home before we're adopted in his family. Do you know that one of the M words means the only word in Hebrew for threshold is a mem word?
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
So you right through it.
Joe never misses a trick.
It does miss a trick. It was so much fun to go through it. And, Jackie is such enormously important and valuable to us and preparing these books for publication. And she had already turned in the book, and here I had another 6 pages. But after she has everything cut. And sweetheart, she didn't complain. She says, say the truth. I really liked it. I gave her the opportunity to cut it out, and she didn't think it was meaningful. She says, no, I wouldn't take out a single word of it. It was really interesting to go through that. And because everything had been done for Adam, then I pulled out all of the A words at the end of it. And, once it'll be published here shortly. So I'd encourage everybody to buy a copy of The Story of Man. And that's how it ends in the last chapter. It's the whole thing from beginning to end. The translations are new. The insights are new. And there's lots of things in it. I mean, I definitely take Abraham to task for what he did on going into Egypt. In fact, as I was doing it, I kept on saying, come on, lay off. You keep on saying that Abraham wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. And come on, this is the father of the covenant. You need to lay off of this. And translation. I'm going to go through it and say, this is what God revealed. These are the words he chose. When we're done, we're going to look at it and say, what can you make of this other than to get
what he said?
Yeah. It's what he said. It's what he said, and what he said was, so there's a lot of things in there that are very controversial. But one of my favorite editors was reading, why are you so hostile towards Yahweh? Well, there's a point where Yahweh, after all of these mistakes, is now the names that she chose for her two boys. And he's just saying, what am I to make of this? And it's not pretty. So what are you going to do? You're going to say, are you going to try to figure out what would have caused this animosity? Because it's bad. And so, but she was saying, why do you have all this animosity? Well, she chose these names. These are really horrible. You got to deal with it. And if you're going to say, well, she chose these names, and one is your way to rebel back and push back against God, and the other one is waste of breath.
Waste of breath.
And Abel is the one that's a waste of breath, and the murderer is her way of rebelling. And you see that, and what are you going to do? Just ignore it?
Kind of got to address it.
I think,
we're not religious. We don't just ignore stuff.
Right, super judgmental, and right is right, wrong is wrong, and we just don't ignore it. No, if it's there, we're going to deal with it. And sometimes we don't have all the answers, but you're never going to increase your understanding if you at least don't consider the possibilities.
You can't just ignore what makes you uncomfortable.
That is correct. It's a big picture out there, and like Jackie wrote me talking about Abraham, because it was just so bad that what he did, and said, maybe the answer is the same answer God gives us with all these people. They were highly flawed individuals, yet they were the best that God could find to work with. They were at least willing and open to listen to him and do the right thing, and so that means that there's hope for the likes of me, with all of my flaws.
Well, how about us?
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't want to speak for your flaws. I can speak for mine.
Okay, fair enough.
But
that's why I love reading about those people. It's like, they did all that. Well, maybe there is hope for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't measure up to the devotion of Moshe. Once Moshe got it in the flow, man.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, he was spectacular. Shabbat, Deuteronomy, where that's all him. And man, that devotion, that level of devotion, I can't measure up to that. I can't measure up. You read Dod's Psalms, his soaring intellect. No, I'm his ability to defend his people. Yeah, that's his gift. I'm glad that's him. But if we compare ourselves to the worst, when Dod's firstborn rapes his daughter, and he doesn't take a stand against that, and so his third born goes and kills the firstborn son because of what he did to his sister, and he doesn't really deal with that, such that the thirdborn then leads a coup against him, and then when the man who led a coup against a united Israel and against God's anointing of Dod as Messiah is killed for this coup, Dod cries like a baby.
Yeah, has to be reprimanded.
Yeah, when God gave Dod here, there's three choices that you have in dealing with this problem. Oh, and he picked the absolute worst. And you just go, oh, come on. Even I could have done better than that. What's wrong with you? It's God's way of saying, yeah, you don't have to be perfect. That's not my, I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for open, responsive, reasonable. Just listen to what I have to say and then respond in an intelligent way. I'm not asking for a lot.
Well,
And
to
boy,
be right, you said it a long time ago. That was so clear, but people kind of, even us, well, no, he wants you to be right. He'll take care of the rest.
Mm-hmm. Just be right. And what did Yahowah say about Abraham? I credited his understanding with him being right. God thinks you're right. Everything else is good. Dode, he was right.
So go where the words lead. Don't stop. Don't stop.
I'm so glad there's a Dode, because it means the rest of us can enjoy what's coming, because he's going to get the chance to herd these cats. It's a job I wouldn't want. I'm telling you, I'm ready. I'm ready to retire. We'll go off and be the bleacher bums. That's cool with me, man. Oh, goodness. But other than Dode's job, all the rest of it's really cool. One of my favorite things is the veneration of Yahowah. After no one listening to him in his lifetime, he now gets to see that it's his words that, properly shared and interpreted, are the catalyst in bringing his people home more than any other. That's very pleasing to me, and ultimately that God gets to celebrate his love for his most beloved, his chosen one, his son, and Dode, and that's also really pleasing to me, and it's just thrilling to me to see God take this flawed but exceedingly brilliant and passionate man, and him working through him in this mighty way. We're just lucky to be here. We're fortunate to be here. Happy to be here. And I'm
thrilled.
When we're condemning Judaism, we're condemning Judaism because God loves his people. He wants you to start listening. Reject the religion so that you can be part of his family. Yeah, pick up the Torah. All right, guys. This time next week.
Wonderful show.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Actually, I probably won't make it next week. I'll be on the road this time next week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
I'm,
Have a wonderful time.
I'm happy though that you're, that you've got so much stuff that's wonderful going on with your job and family, and so it's good to have a fulfilling and supported, enriching life. So we're happy for you.
Yes,
all right. Best of all. Happy Shabbat. Be with you again this time next week. Good night.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye, y'all. Bye.